I stood beside my blindfolded sister in the courtyard of our family compound in Sakaka and watched a man step forward with a sword because she had been caught reading a Bible she had hidden inside the lining of her winter coat for over a year. I was the one who found it. I was the one who told our father. I was the one who tied the blindfold over her eyes with my own hands. But the moment the blade was raised, a light filled that courtyard so blinding that every man with open eyes fell to the ground covering his face, while my sister, the only person who could not see, stood perfectly still and whispered a name that brought the executioner to his knees. Have you ever been so certain you could see the truth that you never realized you were the one who was blind? My name is Tamer ibn Rashid al-Faraj. I'm 30 years old, and on the 26th of January 2022, I stood in the inner courtyard of our family compound in the Al-Suwayrqiya district of Sakaka, Al-Jawf province, Saudi Arabia, and held my sister Yasmin's arm while a sentence of death was prepared because I had discovered her reading a Bible 3 weeks earlier. I had no idea that the God whose book I had reported was about to open the eyes of every blind man in that courtyard by blinding them first. Let me tell you who we were before that night, because without that knowledge, you will not understand the weight of what my sister chose or the miracle that followed. My father, Prince Rashid bin Dafar al-Faraj, was the senior religious counselor for the Al-Jawf provincial government and a man whose word on matters of faith carried the force of law across the northern territories. In our world, a man in that position does not simply advise, he decides who is righteous and who has fallen. Our family compound sat on an elevated ridge in the Al-Suwayrqiya district, a walled estate of sandstone and iron overlooking the flat northern desert. The family mosque occupied the eastern wing, and the call to prayer from its minaret reached across the district like a hand pressing every head toward the ground. My mother, Nof bin Saad, wore full niqab and had memorized the Quran by age 21. She taught Quran to the women and girls of 3 neighboring villages every Thursday. The air in that compound carried the smell of desert sage and Arabian oud and strong coffee with cardamom, and those scents still find me in places they have no right to be. While other boys in the district spend their afternoons racing camels along the desert flats or kicking footballs across the gravel lots near the old souk, I sat in the prayer room of my father's mosque and memorized the Quran under his personal supervision. By the age of 14, I had committed the full text to memory. By 16, I was leading sections of Friday prayer at the district mosque. I never missed a prayer, not during a bout of bronchitis that left me coughing for a week, not during family trips to Amman or Istanbul. The elders who gathered at our compound for council meetings would place their hands on my head and say, "Allah has given the North a guardian." I fasted every Ramadan without complaint and added voluntary fasts on Mondays and Thursdays because my father told me that discipline of the body was the first evidence of discipline of the soul. By 27, I held a degree in civil engineering from Al-Jawf University and managed infrastructure projects for the family's contracting firm. I was engaged to a woman named Abir bint Khalid al-Anezi, a woman my mother had chosen from a respected family in Arar. I had everything: a name, a career, a future wife, and a faith I had never once looked at from any angle other than the one my father had set. Ask yourself this question: have you ever been so sure of what you could see that you never once checked whether your eyes were actually open? My sister Yasmin was 2 years younger than me. She was the quietest person in our household, a listener in a family of speakers, a watcher in a house of men who believed seeing and speaking were the same thing. She had studied education at a women's college in Sakaka and spoke beautiful, careful Arabic that made even casual conversations sound like something worth remembering. She was everything my mother wanted her to be: covered, modest, devout, silent. But what none of us knew was that 14 months before the night in the courtyard, a Filipina physiotherapist named Rosa, who treated my mother for a recurring back condition, had given Yasmin a small Arabic Bible. Rosa had noticed something in Yasmin: a curiosity, a thirst, questions that hovered behind her eyes but never reached her lips. Rosa gave her the Bible wrapped inside a women's health magazine and said simply, "Read this. It will answer what you have been afraid to ask." Yasmin hid the Bible inside the lining of her winter coat, the one she kept in her closet during the hot months when no one would touch it. She read every night for 14 months. She told me later that the Jesus she found in those pages was nothing like the figure our father had described. He was not weak. He was not defeated. He spoke with an authority that shook her to her core. He healed the sick. He touched the untouchable. He forgave people the world had condemned. He claimed to be something no mere prophet would ever dare claim. And the more she read, the more she felt a presence pressing against the walls of the life our family had built around her. I had no idea that the sister who sat quietly beside me at every family meal had been meeting a different God in secret every time the house went dark. I had no idea that her silence was not obedience, it was wonder. I found the Bible 3 weeks before the execution. I had borrowed Yasmin's coat to cover a guest's chair during a dusty windstorm. I felt something rigid in the lining. I opened the seam. The book slid out. My blood went cold. I recognized it instantly. I stood in Yasmin's room holding a Christian Bible that had been hidden inside our compound for over a year, and I felt a rage so total it erased every other thought. I told my father within the hour. His response was methodical and final. Sheikh Hamdan, his religious advisor, was summoned. My uncle Mutlaq, a former military commander with a voice like gravel, arrived within 2 hours. A family council was held that same evening. Sheikh Hamdan declared that a Muslim woman who reads the Bible in secret for 14 months and conceals it within the family compound has committed sustained, deliberate apostasy. The sentence was death. I was given the task of confronting Yasmin and preparing her for what was to come. I had no idea that the Jesus my sister had been reading about for 14 months was preparing to reveal himself in a way so powerful that my entire understanding of God would shatter in a single night. I went to Yasmin's room. I held the Bible in front of her face. I told her what the council had decided. I told her she had one chance to renounce Jesus, tear the Bible apart with her own hands, and return to Islam. She looked at me with the steadiest eyes I had ever seen. No tears, no trembling. She said, "Thamir, I love you, but I have found the truth, and I would rather die seeing than live blind." Those words lodged inside me like a knife I could not pull out. Our plan was grim and simple. Yasmin would be brought to the inner courtyard after Isha prayer. She would be given a final chance to recant. If she refused, the sentence would be carried out privately, and her name would be erased from every family record. I recruited my cousin Hazza to help with the preparations. My uncle Mutlaq would oversee the proceedings. I was to stand beside Yasmin to verify her identity and to witness the act as the family's representative. I felt completely certain that Allah required this. I had zero doubt. The night before, I prayed tahajjud at 2 in the morning and asked Allah to break my sister's heart before the morning broke her body. But as I pressed my forehead to the prayer rug, I felt a weight on my chest so heavy I gasped, like an invisible hand pressing against my ribs from inside. I dismissed it as grief. I barely slept. Have you ever been so convinced you were defending truth that you never asked whether the truth was standing right in front of you, blindfolded, waiting for you to see? They brought Yasmin to the courtyard at 9:15 the following evening. The night was cold and clear. Stars filled the sky above the compound walls. The air smelled of dust and sage and the iron tang of the desert wind. The courtyard was lit by overhead floodlights. My father stood near the eastern wall. My uncle Mutlaq stood beside him. Sheikh Hamdan was at the gate. The executioner, a man named Abu Riyad, who served the family's security detail, stood with a sword at his side. Hazza guarded the entrance. I stood beside Yasmin. She wore a plain white garment. Her hair was uncovered. Her face was calm in a way that did not belong to a woman walking toward her death. I tied the blindfold over her eyes with my own hands. The white cloth covered her from forehead to cheekbone. She did not flinch. She did not resist. She whispered, "Thank you, Thamir. Now I will see him with the eyes he gave me." I did not understand those words then. I understand them now. My father spoke. He told Yasmin this was her final moment. He told her to recant or face the consequence. Yasmin, blindfolded, standing in the center of the courtyard, said clearly, "Jesus is the Son of God. He is alive. I belong to him. I am not afraid." My father nodded to Abu Riyad. The executioner stepped forward. He raised the sword. That is when it happened. The moment that changed everything I believed about God. The light came from everywhere at once. Not from the floodlights, not from the sky, from the air itself. A golden radiance so intense it turned the courtyard into a furnace of brightness. I threw my hands over my eyes. The light burned through my eyelids. I could not see. My eyes were open and I could not see. I heard the sword hit the ground. I heard Abu Riyad cry out. I heard my uncle Mutlaq fall. I heard bodies hitting stone. I heard my father's voice, a sound I had never heard him make, a groan that was neither word nor cry, but something torn from the center of his chest. I was on my knees. I did not remember falling. My palms were flat on the cold stone of the courtyard, and tears I could not explain were streaming from eyes that could not see. Then I heard Yasmin. She was speaking, not screaming, not praying in panic, speaking with a calm so deep it made the ground feel unsteady. She said, "I can see him. Thamir, I can see him. He is standing right in front of me. He is beautiful." The woman with the blindfold over her eyes was the only person in that courtyard who could see. I felt heat pour through my body from the stone, upward through my knees, my chest, my skull. A presence filled the courtyard that was so vast it made every wall feel like paper. I felt love. Not the word, the thing itself. A love so complete it knew every Bible I had confiscated, every family I had torn apart, every knot I had tied in the blindfold over my sister's eyes, and it loved me anyway. Then the voice came, inside my chest, inside my skull, inside the place where my certainty had lived. "Thamir, you blindfolded her, but I opened her eyes. Now let me open yours. She is mine. You are mine. Stop. Come home." I collapsed forward. My face hit the courtyard stone. I wept harder than I had ever wept. The tears were relentless and burning, and they came from somewhere deeper than grief. Every wall I had built since childhood crumbled. Abu Riyad was on the ground 3 meters away, the sword lying untouched beside him. Hazza was pressed against the courtyard wall, shaking. My uncle Mutlaq was on his knees with his hands covering his face. My father was flat on the stone, his whole body trembling. Yasmin knelt beside me. She removed the blindfold from her own face and placed her hand on my back. She said, "He loves you, Thamir. He has been waiting for you your whole life." Minutes could have been hours. Ask yourself this question. How do you explain a courtyard full of sighted men struck blind, while the only blindfolded woman in the room was the only one who could see? When the light faded and my vision slowly returned, I looked at Yasmin and asked the only question left. What do I do now? She sat beside me on the cold stone of the courtyard where she had been seconds from death. She told me about Jesus, about grace, about a God who did not demand death as the price for honesty, but offered life as the reward for faith. She told me about a man named Paul who had supervised the execution of Christians and was knocked blind on a road to Damascus and given new eyes by the very God he was persecuting. She read to me from the Gospel of John about a man born blind whom Jesus healed, and how the religious leaders refused to believe it because it threatened everything they had built. She said what had happened to me was not punishment, it was surgery. God had blinded me so that I could finally see. She held my hands, the same hands that had tied her blindfold, and she led me in a prayer. I said, "Jesus, I have been wrong about you my entire life." I found my sister's Bible and turned her over to die. I tied the cloth over her eyes with my own hands. "But I saw your light tonight. I know you are real. Forgive me, save me. I surrender my life to you completely." Yasmin embraced me. Abu Riyad, still trembling, asked to pray the same prayer. Then Hazza knelt and asked to join. 3 men converted in that courtyard. I had no idea that the place prepared for my sister's execution would become the place where I was born. I was baptized 7 weeks later in a secret ceremony in Jordan. I chose the name Saul because Saul had held the coats of men who stoned a believer, and I had held the blindfold of a sister they meant to kill. What happened next changed everything. The cost was immediate. My father never spoke of what happened in the courtyard. He treated it as though the light, the voice, the collapse of every man present had simply not occurred. Through my uncle Mutlaq, he sent a message the following morning. "You are no longer my son. You are dead to this family. Take your sister and leave before the sun sets." His voice, relayed through Mutlaq's flat tone, was cold and final. My mother called Yasmin that afternoon. She was weeping so hard the words broke apart in her mouth. She said, "You have stolen my son and destroyed my daughter. You are both dead to me." She blocked both our numbers. That was 3 years ago. My engagement to Abir was terminated with a single message from her father. This name no longer exists in our records. Former friends held funeral prayers for us. My engineering credentials were frozen. Our bank accounts were sealed. Yasmin and I fled to Jordan within 3 days, then to a European country I cannot name for our safety. Everything I believed was about to be shattered, and it was. I lost my father, my mother, my tribe, my career, and the only identity I had ever known. But I gained everything that truly matters. I gained Jesus Christ. I gained my sister, not just as blood, but as the bravest person I have ever known. I gained a peace that has not flickered for one single day since that night on the courtyard stone. Look inside your own heart right now and ask yourself whether the blindfold you have been wearing is one you tied on yourself. 2 years after we arrived in Europe, I met a Christian woman named Tabitha at the church where Yasmin and I worship. She was a Congolese believer, a social worker who had survived violence in her own country and carried a faith that did not bend. We married at that same church. The pastor who had walked with Yasmin and me through our first year officiated. Abu Riyad, who had escaped the kingdom months after us, stood beside me. Yasmin read from the Gospel of John during the ceremony. Today, Yasmin leads a ministry for Muslim women across the Middle East who face persecution for choosing Jesus. She works through encrypted networks and safe houses. Over 50 women have been brought to safety under her guidance. I serve alongside her, sharing my testimony through secure channels and underground meetings. Over 110 Muslims have given their lives to Christ after hearing what happened in that courtyard. Some were judges, some were engineers, some were men who had tied their own blindfolds and needed someone to tell them they did not have to stay blind. I still write to my parents twice a year. I send the letters through a trusted contact. I have never received a reply. My daughter Nadia was born 8 months ago. The first words she heard were not the adhan, but a lullaby sung by her aunt Yasmin about a God who gives sight to the blind. I tell Nadia every night that her grandparents love her. I believe they will hold her one day. If he can transform someone like me, a man who tied a blindfold over his own sister's eyes and delivered her to death for reading a Bible, then no darkness is thick enough and no blindfold is tight enough to keep his light from breaking through. The Saudi prince who tied a blindfold over his sister's eyes and stood beside her while a sword was raised no longer exists. In his place stands a servant of Jesus Christ who would stand in that courtyard 1,000 times before he would ever deny the light that blinded the sighted and gave vision to the one who could not see. If Jesus can forgive and transform someone like me, someone who handed his own sister to an executioner for the crime of reading a book, then he can absolutely forgive and transform you, no matter what you have done or where you come from. The same Jesus who flooded a courtyard with light so fierce it brought armed men to the ground and opened the eyes of a blindfolded woman is standing before you right now through this very testimony. He is offering you the same sight, the same love, the same impossible rescue that changed everything for me and for Yasmin. Jesus is calling you right now. Do not wait for blinding light or a voice in the dark. He is already pursuing you. He has been pursuing you since before you pressed play. Will you let him in and discover the love that removes every blindfold and opens every eye?